This is the Capitol Rundown.
Our state is at a crossroads, and we've made an important decision.
You've got culture warriors and you got someone who's a problem solver, and that's how I've always operated, and that's how I'll continue to.
Our pollsters are telling us that this race will narrow. The question is, it's not so much what the candidates are saying, but do they get a chance to say it in TV commercials?
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Thompson. It was one of the biggest weeks of the year in Michigan politics. Tuesday's primary answered the question on everyone's mind: which Republican will run against incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer and earn a shot at becoming Michigan's next governor?
All right, the next governor of the state of Michigan, Tudor Dixon.
The result didn't come as a surprise to many political observers. Dixon had a small but consistent lead in the polls throughout the campaign, and the endorsement by former President Donald Trump just a few days before the election sealed the deal. Dixon ended up with just more than 40% of the vote in a five-way race. Businessman Kevin Rinke got about 20%. Garrett Soldano and Ryan Kelly were close behind Rinke, and Ralph Rebant finished with about 4% of the vote. Dixon thanked her supporters when the race was called in her favor.
Thank you to every man and woman who volunteered, who voted, who shared their story with me, who worked to help make this victory possible. And I see so many of you out there that have worked your butts off for me. And like every time I look and see another face, I'm just amazed at what we were able to accomplish and how many people came together.
Dixon didn't waste any time going after Governor Whitmer. From energy to abortion and on a host of other topics, Dixon said there's a stark difference between her and her opponent.
Our state is at a crossroads, and we've made an important decision. We need to know who we want to be, and I think the people in this room know. The battle lines in this race couldn't be any clearer.
Well, it certainly was a rough primary night for the losing candidates, but Garrett Soldano reminded his supporters that there's more to what's happening in Michigan and the nation than this one race.
We may have lost this battle today, but there is a war that needs to be fought here in the future. And you have to continue to stay engaged, stay activated, stay motivated, stay inspired. And that's how we take back our country. Now look, every loss hurts, don't get me wrong. This will sting, this will hurt with a lot of us for a very long time, but it's okay. It will heal.
Not all of the candidates, however, handled the loss with the same grace. Ryan Kelly, who doesn't accept the outcome of the 2020 presidential election, didn't accept the outcome of the 2022 primary either. In a Facebook post after the race was over, he said he was, quote, not conceding. And even though he finished some 25 points behind the winner, he called for a, quote, publicly supervised hand recount to uphold election integrity. Kelly still faces charges for taking part in the rally and riot at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. So how did Tudor Dixon go from a relative unknown to becoming the Republican nominee for governor? Our Jorma Duran sat down with Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic to break down the results for us.
It's time to get updated politically here in the state of Michigan, and nobody better than this guy right here, Tim Skubic, to talk to us. But maybe not such an update, more of a reaction and then a prediction, Tim. We had the gubernatorial primary. Did it surprise you? What did you think? What do you say?
Well, it was no surprise that Tudor Dixon won this thing. It was sealed, her fate and the fate of the other four gentlemen running against her on the weekend before the election, when a guy named Donald Trump, former president, said, yeah, I'm going to endorse her. And then all of a sudden, the 25% of the people that were undecided in the Republican primary for governor, well, they got the guidance they were looking for. Mr. Trump said vote for her. They did, and she won going away. The guy who finished in second place was 20 points behind. His name was Kevin Rinke. He's going fishing, and Tudor Dixon's going fishing for the governor's job.
So you really do believe that Trump has that much influence, waiting for what he was going to say before they pounced and picked who they wanted?
The answer is a resounding yes. I mean, the facts are there. It was a close contest between Rinke and Ms. Dixon prior to that Trump endorsement. If there had been 2 or 3% of the electorate in the Republican Party undecided, it might not have had the impact. But with 1 out of every 4 voters sitting around saying, I don't know who I'm going to support, and then the Donald says, here's what you need to do, they do it. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It was history making. At no other time in Michigan history has one person been able to control the outcome of a Republican primary for governor, and give Mr. Trump credit. He did it, and Ms. Dixon is the recipient, and now her assignment is to beat the governor who is governor, Gretchen Whitmer.
Jorma and Tim will be back later in the show as we look ahead to the general election. And now that we know what Tudor Dixon thinks of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, what does the governor think of her new opponent? That's coming up next on the Capitol Rundown. Stay with us. Well, now that Republicans across the state have chosen Tudor Dixon as their candidate for governor, efforts are underway to unite the party behind her. GOP leaders hosted a unity event just one day after the primary. Many Republicans were there, including Dixon's former competitor Kevin Rinke. The nominees for Attorney General, Secretary of State, some congressional candidates, and even former Michigan Governor John Engler were also there. But many others were noticeably absent, including former gubernatorial candidates Garrett Soldano, Ralph Rebant, and Ryan Kelly. Well, just because she didn't face any opposition in the primary doesn't mean Governor Whitmer kept quiet. On the day of the primary, Whitmer held 2 rallies for her supporters and volunteers, one in Grand Rapids and the other here in Lansing. She reminded them that it's not just her and the Republican candidate who will be on the ballot in November.
Reproductive rights are on this ballot. Workers' rights are on this ballot. Voting rights are on this ballot. Civil rights are on this ballot. And so we got to make sure that we win, we pull everyone across the finish line so we can continue to deliver for the people of Michigan.
Well, prior to Tuesday this week, the governor didn't have a lot to say about the Republicans who were running to take her place. But the end of the primary marked the beginning of the general election. And on Tuesday night, when we asked the governor what she thought of the competition, she didn't pull any punches.
What do you know about Tudor Dixon?
I think the same as everyone, not a whole lot. You've got culture warriors and you got someone who's a problem solver, and that's how I've always operated, and that's how I'll continue to. This is an extreme group that's running, radicalized by the last, presidency. No matter who comes out of that primary, we're going to have someone who is an election denier, who doesn't believe in any efforts to keep kids more safe in school, who doesn't embrace, protecting women's reproductive rights.
If we end up with 2 women running against each other, is that good for the women's movement?
I think what is good for the women's movement is having candidates who are fighting for women's rights.
Well, now that we know what the candidates think or don't think of each other, we're going to look ahead to November. We'll sit down with Capitol correspondent Tim Skupic again to get his take on what's going to happen over the next 3 months. That's when the Capitol Rundown returns. Well, now that the August primary is over, it's game on for the general election. The tops of the ticket are set, and we're already less than 100 days until November 8th. So we continue our conversation now between Jorma Duran and Capitol correspondent Tim Skupic about what to expect between now and then. And as Tim notes, the Democrats aren't wasting a single day.
Welcome back, and we're now getting to talk about Tudor Dixon versus Gretchen Whitmer. That race is going to be extremely compelling for someone like you and I, Tim. Right now, obviously, Gretchen Whitmer has the edge, but will that gap get closed down over the course of the next few months with Tudor Dixon?
Well, traditionally, governor's races always do close. In the last one, Gretchen Whitmer did win by 9 points over Bill Schuette, basically because Mr. Schuette had that Trump endorsement that worked for him in the primary election, but not so much in the general election, so the governor won that. Our pollsters are telling us that this race will narrow. The question is, it's not so much what the candidates are saying, but do they get a chance to say it in TV commercials? Because you and I both know that TV commercials basically, to a large extent, determine the outcome of these contests. And as we pointed out, Gretchen Whitmer's folks, through the Democratic Governors Association, are already 2 days into the campaign running their commercials to define Tudor Dixon before she gets the money to do it for herself. This is a huge advantage for the Democrats that are floating in bucks. The governor's got a lot of money. She can run these commercials while the Dixon campaign is basically left to try to define her without mass media advertising. And right now, they're at a disadvantage.
There are many topics this election cycle that seem very polarizing, but the majority of people, when they're talked to, when it comes to reproductive rights, gun issues, and even Trump here in Michigan, there's a little bit more than half are on the side of what would I guess you'd say Governor Whitmer. Is that going to be her strength going into this election?
Well, clearly the governor has an advantage because she doesn't have to pivot. She doesn't have to change any of her positions to appeal to her base and to her voters, particularly independent voters. On the other hand, Ms. Dixon does have a problem. She ran in a primary, and she had to do this in order to win. She had to run from the far right of the political spectrum. We know that you can't win mostly these elections if you are just so far out there that the mainstream people will reject you as a candidate. So they call it in the business pivoting, taking where you were, doing a pivot to take a jump shot to maybe just redefine maybe some of your feelings on issues to appeal to independents and the sensible center, as they call it, of the political spectrum. That's the assignment that Ms. Dixon has, and in order to fulfill it, she needs bucks, and she's a little short on the change.
Tim, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I can't wait to talk to you again. It's going to be a very fun next couple of months.
Up with Michigan Republican Congressman Tim Walberg. He won a primary this week in a newly drawn district. He weighs in on the changes and the process of how those districts were made after the break. Michigan Congressman Tim Walberg faced a challenger from within his own party this week. While he came out on top, his win comes in a new district. So this here is the new District 5. It runs clear across the bottom portion of our state all the way from Lake Erie over to Lake Michigan. While Walberg says he's excited about this primary win, he wasn't thrilled with the redistricting process overall. I spoke with him about that earlier this week.
This is a new district, so I'm not an incumbent. I'm running for this new district. And even though I serve in Congress now, it's an all new ballgame.
How do you feel overall about the new districts and the process?
I think we should have done it the way the Constitution originally said. That was having the people's representatives make the districts. This redistricting commission that was put together really took away the power of the people to decide on their districts by electing the state representatives and senators to represent them, and then them doing the job as part of their process, as opposed to a commission that was paid significant dollars to do something that I think a lot of people have said, this didn't work any better than the old way. It worked well for me. I mean, it's given me a strong, solid district, a district that I feel very comfortable with. But I like the old district. When I had pretty much of a swing district, that kept me on my toes. And I think I had to work significantly to let the people understand what the issues were and then how I was going to vote based upon the issues, their response, and the constitutional oath that I had taken. So
what do you see in November overall?
The inflation, gas prices, and the border are still the top three issues of concern to the people of my district. And I think as I've talked with my colleagues from around the country and this state, it's true with their districts as well. So I think it's going to be a majority-making year for Republicans in the House for sure.
Well, on the other side of the aisle, Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin is also working to keep her title in D.C. We'll check in with her when the Capitol Rundown returns. The race to represent the new 7th Congressional District in Michigan is supposed to be one of the hottest in the nation. It'll be a barn burner between Democrat Elissa Slotkin, who's currently in Congress, and Republican State Senator Tom Barrett. The Rundown caught up with Slotkin as she cast her ballot on Tuesday. She says voters have a pretty clear choice.
And I think the contrast between us is really, really clear. The choice will be very, very clear in November. I think we're different in many ways, particularly on substance and on style. On substance, I don't think there's any way around it. I am the Michigan jobs candidate, whether it's the electric vehicle battery plant that we're getting, whether it's the vote we just cast on making chips, microchips in the United States. I am for jobs in our community, good jobs with dignity, whereas my opponent voted, I think, 6 times against that battery plant and has definitely chosen ideology over jobs in his own backyard. So that contrast is very clear. And then I think that it spans over into other issues that are really important in Michigan right now, and that's issues of personal freedom and women's choice. The contrast there is very, very clear. I am a pro-choice candidate and don't believe that government has the right to get inside that conversation between a woman and her doctor. Whereas my opponent has literally campaigned and fundraised off of being against abortion 100% of the time, including for issues of rape and incest and just really egregious circumstances. And lastly, on style, I just think that partisan politics is killing this country. It's killing the state of Michigan. I grew up, my dad was a Republican, my mom was a Democrat. I'm willing to work with anyone who is willing to work. If you are willing to come to the table and negotiate, I am here to work on things and make the community better. I am not going to be an ideologue who spouts off, just in a couple of one-liners and then moves on. And I think that's a real contrast between us, where he celebrates his outsider status, and I am like, put your nose down and get to work.
Well, after the primary was over, Slotkin noted a few things in an email to her supporters. She says even though the Republicans turned out to vote in a contested governor's race, Slotkin says she's still got more votes across the district than Barrett. She also says she even beat him in his own county. We'll be sure to have Barrett on a future edition of the Capitol Rundown to weigh in on this race as well. Well, if you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, you can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at that symbol on your screen right now. It will take you right to the sign-up page. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We hope to see you back here again next weekend.